Professor Cheh, welcome to Always Real Talk.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Well, look, it's happy to have you. I know that you've had a long day. I know you've done your duties as a council member and representative of Ward 3 in the D.C. City Council. I know you've been, of course, in class as a professor of the George Washington Law School. I want to ask you, you are the only person that I know, and we tried to research this, and we didn't get too far. And it's probably that many legislators or people that have been sworn into office by a Supreme Court justice. And I've had the opportunity to witness you being sworn in by Justice Ginsburg. Why don't you tell me how that impacted your life? Just getting sworn in by a Supreme Court justice. That's awesome.
Well, it was awesome. It was a singular honor. I knew Justice Ginsburg professionally because we had served on some committees together. And then, she was a professor at one point in her life too. And I was extremely honored when I discovered that she had actually read some of my law review articles. And in one case, sent me this note about one of them. And so when it came time for me to be sworn in, as you know, Kwame, because you were on the council for years, at the swearing in ceremony, all people who are elected, they have to go out and round up their own judges. And I just wrote her a note and I said, would you consider swearing me in? And she said, of course, Mary. I said, well, okay, fine. But there's actually a little story connected with that too. As you also know, Kwame, because you've been sworn in, the function of the judge is to walk up to the podium and administer the oath, okay? That's it. They administer the oath, then they go away, and then the official gives a bit of a talk. I was sitting on the end with her. She was my judge, and I was called up to be sworn in. And so we get up, and as you may remember, Justice Ginsburg is kind of slight, and she was a very quiet talker. We get up to go over to the podium, and she said in her very, very soft voice, she said, Mary, do you mind if I say a few words about you? Now, that hasn't been done before, and it wasn't done since. The judge is supposed to just administer the oath. But I said, Justice Ginsburg, you can say whatever you want. And so she said these very nice things about me. But it was so sweet, and I was over the top delighted that she agreed to do it, because she was an icon. Every woman lawyer in the United States, in fact, every woman in the United States owes her a debt of gratitude, because if not single-handedly, almost single-handedly, she changed the law in the United States to achieve equal treatment for women. And it's just extraordinary because she had a strategy, she had powerful arguments, she made those arguments, and she really changed the law for women. And she did it at a time when women, were really kept out of things. And her major premise, which seems so obvious now, is that every woman, like every man, ought to be able to have opportunities to achieve their dreams, to go forward and not be pigeonholed because they are women. There's this idea, okay, women were put on a pedestal and they were to be protected, the weaker sex. But that pedestal was actually a cage, and it was a stereotype that affected men too. She wrote the opinion in United States versus Virginia, which was about admitting women to the Virginia Military Institute. And her philosophy is captured nicely there. She said, hallelujah, men and women are physically different. No question about it.
Right.
But and not every woman could go through the rigors of the VMI training, but not every man could either. If there were some women, if there was one woman who wanted to do it and could do it, she should have the opportunity to do it. And she said it so elegantly in the opinion. She said, we've been here before. Women can't be police officers because they'll upset, the vibe, of riding around in the car or whatever. They can't be firefighters. They can't go to the national military training. They can't do this and they can't do that. Yes, they can, and they should be given the opportunity. And if some women can follow a certain path, let them follow it. And, I don't want to go on too much, but, talking about strategy was when she was with the ACLU in their women's project, which she essentially created and led. Her strategy in part was to bring equal protection cases, gender equality cases, on behalf of men.
Right.
So that she could really illustrate how this idea, these stereotypes about what men can do and what women can do. And one of the cases, when it was on behalf of a man, there were things in the law that presumed that women were dependent upon men and could get death benefits when the man died. But if the woman died, the man had to show that he was dependent upon her. And, my screen went dark there a little bit. I don't know if that was on my end or yours. And that man wanted to raise his own child and get these benefits. But he had to jump through all these hoops in order to get benefits that were automatically given to the woman, because there was this assumption that the woman was dependent on the man, but the man couldn't possibly be dependent upon a woman. But she brought those kinds of cases to show in stark relief what these stereotypes were doing for men and for women. And she, today they don't exist. These discriminations against men and women don't exist because of her.
Well, clearly, you mentioned that women, but men owe her also.
Yes, they do.
The country and the world is better because of her.
She liberated us.
Absolutely.
Us. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And you saw that from just the love this being poured out for her, no matter where you are, no matter who you are. And to be honest with you, no matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, it's a level of respect,
right.
Because everyone understands that what she fought for, what she did at the time that she did it, has changed the world for the better. And so that's, we see that. Let me ask you, what has her life and her service on the court itself, how has that impacted you professionally and personally?
Well, her life is itself an illustration that women can pursue their dreams and can follow, their professional interests. When she was graduating from law school, I forget how few women were actually in the profession. And she faced all sorts of obstacles. I believe there were 4 women at Harvard Law School, and I think the dean had lunch with them. I think this is the recounting of the story. And he asked each one of them why they thought they should be there in place of a man. They had to justify themselves. And then, to move on in the profession, she was denied an opportunity to teach at Columbia and some other schools, and she was given an offer by Rutgers Law School, and she took that. Ultimately, she did wind up teaching at these other schools, but they couldn't see their way past the fact that she was a woman, even though she graduated at the top of her class and made law review, etc. So she showed the way. She made it possible. We all sort of have to be in her debt in the most, dramatic of ways.
Absolutely.
I might not be here, where I am. I don't know. But certainly in the legal world, the ground has shifted dramatically. I think right now it might be the case that there are more women in law school than there are men. And to compare that to the situation when she went to law school, it's a dramatic, it's like night and day.
Absolutely. Now, I want to go into the Constitution itself, because I know
Mhm.
that you are a constitutional scholar and you get it. And there's a lot of conversation now based on, how to move forward. And one of the things that keeps coming up, and we just had someone text us, so I want to put that out
Right,
there while I'm talking to you,
right.
is what effect does the Supreme Court have when it's only 8 individuals on the court to actually do business and to operate from a constitutional perspective?
Well, they can, of course, continue to operate, and they have. There have been other instances where the court has lost a member, and not necessarily because the member died, though that's one way. There could be a resignation. Also, there could be a recusal. Sometimes justices may have worked on a matter, maybe when they were in the Solicitor General's office or some other thing, and they have to recuse themselves. So you have 9 members, so that you'd be left with 8. So what is a court to do when it has 8 members and it faces the prospect, not necessarily, but it faces the prospect of having a tie vote? Well, when they sit in conference and they see what the votes are likely to be, they could see that they would wind up with a tie vote, and they might let it go forward nevertheless. Maybe they won't wind up with a tie vote. Maybe it'll be, 5-3. But if it's a tie vote, there are certain options. They could let it go forward, in which case the lower court opinion is still on the books. And what the Supreme Court did by issuing its opinion with a tie vote has no precedential authority. But they could do lots of other things. They could take the case and carry it over to be re-argued when they're at full strength, or they could go back and think about the case and decide it on narrower grounds and secure enough votes to make it, say, 5-3 or 6-2 or something of that nature. There are ways around the possibility of a tie vote. The court is not rendered, immobile during that time. They have all of those options.
Well, and clearly that's, the conversation today is that they're Republicans and the president moving quickly to fill the seat as quickly as they can, saying that they can get it done before the end of the year, possibly before the election, because they have to, because you never know what happens during the election process. If in fact we have another Gore versus Bush or Bush versus Gore or whatever the technical name was for that particular argument. I was in Florida for the recounting. I was on the Gore campaign. What happens? And that's the argument, right? We have to hurry up and fill
No,
this.
that's a straw man, so to speak, because the court can carry on and has carried on when it's missing a member, and it has many ways to proceed, and it can hold a case over, and it can have it re-argued when they get back at full strength. That's just one of the options that they have, but that's not what this is about. This is about, I think Joe Biden said it correctly, raw political power. They have the power because they have the presidency. The Republicans have the presidency, and they have control of the Senate. And it looks like they have the votes to confirm a nominee that President Trump sends over. And they want that. They want that power because they will tip even more dramatically the direction of the court in a conservative direction, and that's what they want. That's what they want, and they have the power to get it. And they could say, well, we're doing this because we're worried about tie votes or nonsense. They're doing it because they have the raw political power to do it.
Right, to do it. Now, let me ask, because people always ask, should there be a balance on the Supreme Court from a constitutional and political perspective? I mean, that seems to be the argument all the time. If you're a Republican and you're in power and you have a Senate, you're going to move your nominee, right? That's what you're going to do. If you're a Democrat and you're in power, you have a Democrat Senate, you're going to move your nominee. If you're stuck like the second term, like the first term of Obama, he could have moved all of the nominees and all the judges because he had the House and he had the Senate, and he could have did everything he wanted to do. The second term, of course, that was a little bit different based on the Senate, and that's why you had nominees being held up. But what is your professional opinion as it relates to, because it's still political, right? And it's political views based on, who's in office and who appoints you.
It's inherently political, but I think the best approach is to appoint judges who are in the mainstream, whether it's Democrat or Republican, and not extreme candidates. There have been candidates, nominees, who haven't made it. And it was always the thought that, in more recent times, that a president ought to get the person whomever he chooses. But more recently, the philosophy of the nominee is relevant because there may be fundamental issues about which the public has an agreement, but you could appoint somebody who's out of the mainstream of majority viewpoints, and that person, I think, should not be nominated. The court shouldn't. You should obviously appoint very highly qualified people, but in the mainstream of legal thought. Now, definitionally, you would say, well, what is the mainstream? And when does somebody...
That was my next question. What is the definition?
Right. How do you be, how might you become too extreme? Well, there are certain issues that, if the person is honest during a confirmation proceeding and they say, if somebody said, for example, certain things are kind of settled. If somebody said, well, I don't think that the Bill of Rights applies to state governments, I think our jaws would drop. And is that a possible interpretation of the Constitution? Yes, it is. But it's certainly out of the mainstream and conventional understandings. Now, should there be a litmus test? Should the litmus test be your view about abortion? Should it be your view about states' rights? Should it, if somebody said that they didn't believe that Congress had the power to pass civil rights statutes, I think we would disqualify that person immediately. But,
absolutely.
What lane would make you mainstream and not radical, not extreme? Let
me ask you a question. I mean, it seems as though as long as you have the votes, either party, right? So if your Democrats got the votes, and the president wants a nominee, they're going to, and is given the fact that there's nothing there that's outrageous. Now, clearly, there could be some things that no one's ever going to agree on, some of the philosophies and the interpretation of the Constitution, right? There's different interpretations, and people have different understandings and beliefs. That's that's just going to happen, right? Outside of that, the president has said he's going to send down a woman. Clearly, that woman will not have the same viewpoints as Justice Ginsburg. So,
absolutely not.
Does that excite you that he's going to nominate a woman?
Well, excite me. If so, I care more about the views, although I think I do also agree with Justice Ginsburg when she was in the Rose Garden being introduced by President Clinton, who nominated her. She said, I await the day when the appointment of a woman is not remarkable. It's just kind of regular. And I think somebody asked her, well, how many women do you think should be on the Supreme Court? She said 9. So
remember that.
Yeah. Now, it's great that, the next nominee would also be a woman. I think that does matter. But it can't, in my mind, overcome a judicial philosophy that will upset many of the core values that I have. So you don't get a free ride just because you're a woman. Clarence Thomas was nominated to replace Justice Thurgood Marshall. Good grief. My screen is going black again. I don't know.
And they actually had him. You're good on this side. And they actually gave him, a hard way to go. I mean, it was you remember the hearings, and you remember
I do indeed.
All of the media.
And his vote was quite close. It was quite close. I think it was I don't know, 54 to 46 or something like that, or maybe
Yep.
even closer than that, um, because of his views, And uh, the fact that, it was a black Court of Appeals judge replacing a black Supreme Court justice, and if that's all you were thinking of, wow, you really lost sight of uh, who Justice Thurgood Marshall was. And I don't think it was a good appointment to replace Thurgood Marshall either.
Right, and so we see that that's kind of playing itself out with whoever this nominee that comes down
Mhm.
from the president. I want to go to something that's being debated and talked about, mostly by liberals, of course, and that has to do with expanding the number of seats on the Supreme Court. What is the process for that constitutionally to be able to
Well,
do that?
Congress has the power. The members of the Supreme Court, they have not always numbered nine. They numbered more at one point, slightly more. They've numbered five. It's been changed over time. Congress has the power to create, with such regulations and exceptions, of members of the operations of the courts, and that includes, the date on which they begin. We're used to the first Monday in October, but at one time when Jefferson didn't want an opinion coming out from the Marshall Court early on because he was worried what they might decide, he took over Congress and the presidency, and they changed the term of the court from a particular date to another date, which had the effect of delaying the court coming back into session for over a year. These kinds of things have happened. Franklin Roosevelt tried to pack the court because he was not satisfied with the justices who were seemingly striking down a lot of his New Deal legislation. He was trying to get us out of a depression. And, so he said, well, look, I need better results here. So I'm going to ask Congress to add to the number of members of the court. He was rebuffed. It was such a raw attempt to make outcomes of a certain kind, and so I don't know how this would be received. I don't think it's a good idea. Now, there are other things. There are other things Congress could do. Also, I don't think it's necessarily a good idea. The Supreme Court, you have to have a Supreme Court. The Article 3 says there shall be a Supreme Court. So you have to have a Supreme Court. It can have a different number of members. It can have a different date to begin its operations, but you have to have a Supreme Court, and it has to exercise original or trial type jurisdiction in a very narrow group of cases. With all other cases within the federal court jurisdiction are cases that the Supreme Court can decide in its appellate jurisdiction. That's what we see mostly all the time. However, it's an appellate jurisdiction under such exceptions as Congress and regulations that Congress will make. So it is possible that the Congress could say, it's possible that the Supreme Court shall have no appellate jurisdiction to decide any cases. We've never done that, but they could play that end of the game too by limiting the appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court of the United States. Or they could try to, add to the number of justices. I think that either of those strategies are not well advised, and I hope we don't go down that path. But I do hear the chatter. You hear it. I hear it.
Well, we hear it, but once again, it goes back to the Supreme Court itself. It's just, some people, as you grow up, you think Supreme Court is just this different branch of government that just, basically looks at the law. There may be some different opinions on it, but all in all, they follow the Constitution, and, they're over there, right? And now all of a sudden, it just looks like they're just part of the whole political process of America, right?
I know
and it's all politics.
And, the court, it's been said about the court that the court is the least dangerous branch. And it's the least dangerous branch because it has to win the legitimacy in the eyes of the public. It doesn't have armies to enforce its orders. It doesn't have money like Congress has, the power of the purse. What it has is its legitimacy in the eyes of the public. And it would be a terrible thing, a terrible thing. And Bush versus Gore, that opinion was a problem in this regard. It looked like they were acting strictly politically to make the presidential election come out a certain way. But it would be a terrible thing if we diminished the Supreme Court of the United States, its legitimacy in the eyes of the public. Because as you said, you grow up and you think, okay, they might decide this one day and that the next day, and we might not agree with this or we might not agree with that. But at least we think that they're doing their job in an apolitical way, and certainly not a partisan way. Now, we know that justices are appointed in part because the president, has a view of things and wants that ideology expressed in the law, and that happens. But we also think that when a member of the court gets on the court, and I'm thinking of Chief Justice Roberts now in particular, he was appointed as a conservative justice, but his behavior on the court, I think, speaks to the legitimacy of the court. He was the fifth vote in a recent abortion case to strike down, rather, the abortion statute as unconstitutional. Even if he may have had that view originally, he said, you know what, we had almost this exact same statute a few terms ago, and we struck it down. And I feel bound by that recent precedent. So there
And he
is
surprised a lot of people by
right.
that, by doing that.
That's exactly right. But it shows his integrity as a justice and not somebody who just wants to come out in a political sense on one side of the fence or the other. And I think that, that kind of justice is the kind of justice I would like, whether appointed by a Republican president or a Democratic president.
So let me ask you a question. So are you saying that, because when Chief Justice was nominated, that wasn't the case? People were, rallying against him, feeling as though he had different views that were different than theirs. Mm-hmm. He got on the court. He's pissed off some folks on the right by, moving more to the center. He's impressed people like yourself and others because he's done things that people would have bet $1 million that he wouldn't have voted in that way. So is there an opportunity for a woman to be nominated by this president that could follow the same path?
It's possible. I think, for example, of Justice Kennedy. He was appointed as a conservative justice, and he was a frustration to people on the right. He's the one who authored the opinions, recognizing the rights of gays to marry. He also authored other opinions that you would have thought, gee, in the conservative script, he shouldn't have come out that way. But, I think when you sit as a justice of the Supreme Court, you do have to take a view of things that is different from partisan politics. That shouldn't be what your guide is. Your guide should be precedent, reason, justice, fairness, the basic principles of equal protection and due process of law. And while we may disagree, on certain opinions, certain matters, if those are the values that steer you, you could be appointed by a Republican or a Democrat and nevertheless be a justice in whom we have confidence and who we respect. I don't know who the nominee will be. I mean, there's speculation about it, and then you don't know how that nominee will actually serve on the court. But the deeper issue in the political space is whether President Trump and the Republican majority in Congress should rush to name somebody when they themselves they're either hypocrites or liars, frustrated President Obama naming somebody when many months would be between the president's nomination and his leaving office. And now there are just like 6 weeks between putting someone on the court, President Trump putting someone on the court and an election. And if you really believed, as many of them said they believed, that if it's so close to the election, and it's so much closer than what President Obama faced, if you really believe that, and you said that, and you were you lying, or you're just a hypocrite? Then this is a case where the election result should have a major influence on who the next nominee is.
Professor, I agree, but you and I know that, placing a justice on the Supreme Court is powerful, and it only comes around. You don't get that many bites at that apple. And when you're in power, the Republicans have made it very clear. When we're in power, we take full advantage of our power. President Trump has nominated filled 198 seats, judges, 198. They were vacant, right? They were vacant. He filled them. Right, he has. I don't know how many women he has that he filled with women, but I know he has zero
reason why he had so
black
many
people on it.
vacancies is because the Republicans frustrated the appointment of President Obama.
True, and I agree with you that is hypocritical. I agree with you that it is that they was the reasons for doing it had nothing to do with we need to wait for another president. It had everything to do with that's not who we want. And now they're in a situation where they're willing to put it all on the line. Many of the senators are willing to put their reputation on the line.
You identified it again, and as is the conversation. We have the power, and we're going to keep it, and we're going to exercise it. And too bad for you.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think if the Democrats were in power and they had the Senate, that they would do the same thing?
I hope that they would hold true to their claim of saying that if it's so close to the election, the election should be held first. I would hope that they would be true to that. But you don't know. You don't know.
Right. Well, I know it's.
And now you see the coarseness and the hypocrisy and the lying and the exercise of raw political power. It will have its influence the other way. We're dumbing down, and a race to the bottom is what we have, sort of ethically and politically.
No, absolutely. And you have young folks looking at this process and hearing people say one thing and then seeing them do something different. And the message that we're telling them is when you have power, exercise it as quickly and as often as you possibly can, no matter what your core values are. And I think it's a bad signal. I understand it. I don't agree with it, but that's what they do. I know it's been a long day for you. I know you had a lot going on, and you took time to come on the show. We really appreciate it. Always appreciate getting your expert advice on anything that has to do with the Constitution. But more importantly, I know how important and how it affects you, the passing of Justice Ginsburg. And I don't know anyone else that kind of like knows a justice firsthand and kind of brings them and talks to them. I remember in the holding room and all of that stuff. And I just thought that impacted my life, just to know that this was a strong woman who really impacted the lives of so many people, that, some of the things that are taking place today is because she took that first step. And,
absolutely.
My daughter's like, wow, damn. She goes, it needs to be another woman. So it'd be interesting to see how that, and she's 19, and so she's following all of this, and she understands, the life of Justice Ginsburg at 19 years old, which is telling, right? So once again, thank you for coming on the show.
Sure.
Please tell everyone hello, especially your family. I know your grandmother now, right?
I'm a grandma. That I am.
Yeah, I saw the pictures, and I can see the big smile you still have on your face when that word comes up.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right.
I'll be seeing her soon,
All
happily.
right. Well, if it's always real talk, you know it's going to be real.
Okay. Thanks, Kwame.